During what was expected to be a routine political discussion, U.S. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett found herself moved to tears during a powerful and emotional exchange with President Ibrahim Traoré. What he said wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was real, honest, and deeply human. This unexpected moment touched millions and turned a regular interview into one of the most unforgettable segments on live television. It was supposed to be a simple, televised conversation. US Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had flown to Burkina Faso for what her team called a standard diplomatic interview. They expected polite answers, discussions about West Africa's security, maybe a few economic talking points. The cameras rolled, the lights came on the studio. Was cool and quiet. President Ibrahim Traoré entered, calmly offered a gentle handshake, and sat down beside her. His presence was humble, his voice soft. Things started off as planned, but something shifted. It was when she asked him, "How do you keep hope alive with so many challenges?" He didn't answer right away. He stared at the floor, then looked at her, not as a president, but as a person, and he said, "Hope doesn't come from speeches, it comes from funerals." The room froze. Jasmine blinked. She wasn't expecting that. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. He leaned forward. "I've buried more friends than I've shaken hands with world leaders." There was silence, and that's when the tears started forming in her eyes, because in that one quiet moment, she realized this wasn't a conversation, it was a confession. The interview kept going, but something had changed. Traoré wasn't answering like a politician. He spoke slowly, gently, as if he was remembering. More than he was reporting, "My closest friend was named Malik." He said. He looked off to the side, hands clasped, thumb nervously rubbing his knuckle. "He died during an ambush while trying to protect a school. They shot him in the leg first. He bled. For 30 minutes, no ambulance came." Jasmine covered her mouth. She wasn't expecting this. No one was, he continued. "When I got there, he was still holding his radio, still calling for help, still believing someone would come. And did someone come?" she asked, barely whispering. He shook his head slowly. "Only me, and I came too late." No one moved. The cameras were still, the crew silent. "He was the reason I joined the army," Traoré added, "and now I lead a country he never lived to see free." His voice didn't crack. It didn't need to. It was the calm that hurt the most, that soft, steady voice talking about death like it had become normal. And in that moment, Jasmine realized this man wasn't leading for power. He was leading out of pain. After the break, Jasmine asked something unexpected. "Is there anyone you carry with you?" Traoré reached slowly into the inside pocket of his modest jacket. From it, he pulled out a worn, creased photo, a black and white picture, faded, almost torn. It showed 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl, standing in front of a small mud house. "This was us," he said, before everything changed. He pointed to the girl. "My sister, her name was Aminata." "What happened to her?" Jasmine asked gently. "She died of malaria." At 11, he paused. "We had no money for medicine. We tried boiling leaves and praying it. Wasn't enough." He folded the photo carefully and placed it back in his pocket. "I promised her at her grave that one day no child would have to die because they're poor." His hands trembled slightly. "I've kept that photo with me ever since, even on the battlefield, even in this office." Jasmine wiped her eyes, and for a moment, the cameras didn't matter, the titles didn't matter. Just a man holding a photo and a woman. Realizing this wasn't politics, it was grief, they were down to their final 10 minutes on air. The producer signaled Jasmine to stick to policy questions, but her heart wouldn't let her. She leaned in and quietly asked President Traoré, "What do you dream about?" He didn't flinch. "I don't," he said. "I stopped dreaming the day I saw my mother collapse from hunger." Jasmine stared at him. "I was 15, he continued. "We had no food left. She fed me the last bit of rice and told me she'd already eaten, but I found out later she hadn't eaten in 3 days." His voice tightened. "She smiled as she passed out just to keep me calm." Jasmine's eyes filled. Again, she shook her head, trying to hold back the emotion. "I still see her face." He added, "Even now, every time I eat, I ask myself, did I earn this?" There was a long, aching pause, and then Jasmine whispered, "I'm sorry." Traoré looked at her, his eyes soft but steady. "Don't be. Just remember, some of us didn't grow up trying to change the world. We grew up just trying to survive it." And the room went silent. Once again, after the interview ended, Jasmine stepped outside the palace for air. That's when she saw her, a barefoot girl, no older than 8, standing quietly beyond the security gate. She held a small piece of cardboard with the words, "Can you give my mama a chance?" Jasmine was about to call someone over when Traoré appeared beside her. "She comes here every Friday," he said softly. "What does she want? She thinks if the president sees her, her mother will get work. The mother washes clothes, but hasn't had a client in weeks. Have you spoken to her?" Traoré nodded. "Many times I bought them food, paid rent, but she doesn't want help. She wants dignity." A job. He walked over, knelt beside the girl, and handed her a small folded paper. She smiled, hugged him tightly, and ran off. "What was that?" Jasmine asked. "Contract for her mother, with full benefits." Jasmine's throat tightened. "You don't publicize this." He shook his head. "Not everything needs a camera." And in that moment, Jasmine realized some leaders build image, but this one was building lives. That evening, Jasmine was invited to dine. In the president's private quarters, the table was modest. No gold, no fanfare, just rice, beans, and grilled chicken. But one thing stood out. An empty chair set neatly at the corner. Jasmine looked around. "Are we expecting someone else?" she asked Traoré. Gently shook his head. "That's for my brother Adam." She paused. "Where is he?" "Gone taken in a raid when I was 17. I was supposed to be there, but I had left early to find water." He stared at the chair. "He always sat there, told me stories." While we ate, Jasmine's eyes were glassy. "I keep that chair for him, not out of sadness, but memory, to remind me that I'd lead for those who never made it to this table." She nodded slowly, and then without a word she moved to sit beside that empty chair. They ate in silence, and outside the city, lights shimmered softly, because sometimes the most powerful statement is setting a place for someone. The world has forgotten. On Saturday morning, Jasmine asked to visit where Traoré had grown up. He hesitated at first, then nodded. A short drive later, they arrived at a modest clay brick home on the edge of town. Inside there was a single small room with 2 beds, a broken fan, and a framed photo of a smiling woman on the wall. "My mother," he said, voice soft. The room was frozen in time-faded curtains. Old sandals under the bed, a pencil drawing stuck to the wall with tape. "You still keep this place?" Jasmine asked. He nodded. "This is where I first learned hunger and hope. I come here to remember." She walked around quietly and stopped at a tiny metal bowl near the window. "What's this?" she asked. He smiled. Faintly, "My mother used to save coins in that bowl. Every time she had 10 francs, she'd drop one in," she said. "A country doesn't change by the millions. It starts with the smallest sacrifice." Jasmine looked at the bowl. It was empty, but somehow it held everything. Later that day, the two sat under a neem tree behind the house. There was no camera this time, no microphone, just wind leaves and truth. Jasmine asked quietly, "Why do you carry all this pain so quietly?" Traoré took a long breath. "Because shouting doesn't bring back the dead." He looked down at his hands. "I was once captured," he said, "during a rebel attack. I was barely 20. They tied me up, kicked me, beat me." Jasmine's breath caught but one of them recognized me. He looked up. We had gone to school together. I gave him my lunch once when his mother fell sick. She was stunned. He untied me when no one was watching, told me to run, and did you know? I stayed and begged for the lives of the others. His voice cracked for the first time. They didn't listen. A tear rolled down Jasmine's cheek, and now she asked, "I try to lead like that boy, quietly, with mercy." There was nothing else to say, because sometimes the greatest leaders aren't remembered for what they survived, but for how they used survival to save others. That evening, back at the palace, Jasmine noticed a tiny pair of worn-out children's shoes on a shelf behind the president's desk. She paused. "Do you have a child?" she asked. Traoré walked over slowly, gently touching the shoes. "No," he said quietly. "These belong to a boy named Idrissa." He sat down. "I met him during a visit to a displaced persons camp. He was 7, no parents, no shoes, just 2 plastic bags tied to his feet." He paused. "He gave me those shoes, said, 'You can walk farther than me, Mr. President.'" Jasmine held her breath. 3 days later, he died of pneumonia. She turned away, trying to hide her tears. "I wanted to bury the shoes with him," he added, "but his aunt begged me to keep them," she said. "He believed you were different, proven right." He looked at Jasmine. "I keep them here to remind myself of the weight I carry every step I take is borrowed from someone who never got the chance." And that day, a pair of little shoes said more about leadership than any crown or flag ever could. On Sunday morning, President Traoré invited Jasmine to visit a rural clinic just outside Ouagadougou. No press, no security show, just 2 cars and a quiet drive. The clinic with small tin roof, cracked walls, and the smell of antiseptic hanging in the air inside. Jasmine noticed one empty bed among rows of sick children. That bed used to belong to a boy named Thomas Traoré, said his voice barely. Above a whisper, he had tuberculosis. His mother walked 18 kilometers, carrying him here, but when she arrived, the only oxygen tank we had was broken. Jasmine looked down. We called the capital for a replacement. It arrived 2 hours too late. He pointed to the ceiling fan, which barely moved that day. I realized something painful being president doesn't always mean you can save someone in time. Jasmine wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. We later fixed the tank, repainted the walls, but that bed, he paused, that bed will always remind me leadership isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about who we lost while we waited. And in that room, the silence was heavier than any speech. Later that day, Jasmine joined Traoré at a local prison, where he was scheduled to speak with inmates as part of a rehabilitation project. He entered quietly, no suit, just a plain shirt and sandals. They led him to a man sitting alone in the corner. This is Asaf. He said. The man stood slowly, older now, with graying hair and soft, tired eyes. We fought on opposite sides of a conflict years ago. Traoré explained. He was captured, and I gave the order to detain him. Jasmine's heart dropped, but today, Traoré continued. He teaches other prisoners how to read. He volunteered for it, even asked for more books. Jasmine turned to Isef. Why did you forgive him? He smiled. Because he changed, and because I've done things I regret. Traoré stepped forward. I didn't come here to lead a country of perfect people, he said. I came to build a country where broken people still have a future. Jasmine couldn't hold back anymore. A tear fell, and in that prison cell of all places, she saw the kind of freedom that no law could give, the freedom that comes from healing. That night, Jasmine sat in the guest quarters overwhelmed. She took out her phone to write a short message to her mother back in Dallas. Mom, I don't know how to explain this trip. I've cried more in 2 days than I have in 2 years. She paused, deleted it, started again today. I watched a president sit with a man he once called an enemy. I saw him leave flowers by a child's hospital bed again. She stopped. Nothing felt big enough. No words could match what she had seen. She stood up, walked through the hall, and saw Traoré by himself on the palace balcony. Couldn't sleep. She asked. He smiled. You get used to carrying things. She nodded. I tried to write my mom, but I couldn't finish the message. He turned to her. Gently, some feelings don't fit into words. That's why we live them out. Instead, Jasmine looked at him, and for the first time, she understood this wasn't just a political trip. This was a heart learning to feel again. On Monday, Jasmine accompanied Traoré to a small military outpost. It was nothing like American bases, just a few concrete buildings, worn-down uniforms, and the smell of sand and sweat. They were there to honor a fallen soldier. His name was Jean-Baptiste. He had died protecting a school bus from an ambush alone, with no backup. Jasmine looked at the single-framed photo hanging on the wall. He was just Arsène Traoré, said first in his family too. Finished school, joined the army to pay for his sister's surgery. There were no reporters, no ceremony, just the mother of the soldier holding back tears as she handed Traoré a small leather notebook. He wrote about you, she said. Traoré opened the last page. It read, if I die before seeing peace, tell the president. I still believe he's the right one to finish what we started. Jasmine turned away, her face crumbling. Traoré held the notebook tightly. I lead for people like him. I walk in their names. And at that moment, Jasmine understood why his silence carried more power than 1,000 speeches. That evening, back at the palace, Jasmine was preparing for their farewell dinner when she heard quiet footsteps outside her door. It was Traoré, phone in hand, face pale, shoulders slumped. She stepped into the hallway. Is everything okay? He nodded barely. I just spoke to the father of a girl who was kidnapped last night by militants in the north. Jasmine froze. I had promised her safety 2 days ago. She was supposed to start school today. He ran his hand over his face. I told him to trust me, that we were making progress. But now, all I have are words. Jasmine reached out, gently touched his arm. You carry so much alone, she said. He didn't deny it. Every name, every face, every promise. I couldn't keep. They don't disappear. When the cameras turn off, his voice broke slightly. I will get her back, even if it's the last thing I do. And in that dimly lit hallway, Jasmine saw it, not just the weight of leadership, but the pain of a man who wanted nothing more than to keep a child safe, and couldn't. The farewell dinner was simple. Plantains, beans, grilled fish, no guests, just Jasmine, Traoré, and the silence between them. She was supposed to leave the next morning, but something didn't sit right in her chest as they stood to say goodbye. Jasmine stepped forward, hesitated, and then, without thinking, wrapped her arms around him, a tight, full hug, one filled with pain, respect, and something unspoken. He didn't move at first, then slowly he returned the hug, a hand on her shoulder, his eyes closed. "I didn't expect to feel this much," Jasmine whispered. "Neither did I," he said softly. They pulled apart Jasmine, wiped her eyes, and smiled sadly. "Thank you for being more than a title." He nodded. "Thank you for seeing past mine." That night, as Jasmine lay in bed, she didn't sleep. She thought of the boy with no shoes, the empty bed, the notebook, the photo, the girl still missing, and of a president who never raised his voice but somehow had moved the whole world. Jasmine's final morning in Burkina Faso was quiet. As they drove to the airport, she asked Trey if they could stop by the neighborhood where the little girl with the cardboard sign had stood. They found her again. Same spot, same scarf tied around her neck, but this time her mother stood beside her. Tears in her eyes and wearing a clean apron. "She starts work today." Traoré said, "Laundry for the presidential residence." The woman stepped forward and hugged him tightly. "No one ever saw us," she whispered, "but you did." The little girl gave Jasmine a tiny flower made of paper. "For you," she smiled to remember. Burkina Faso. Jasmine knelt down, tears filling her eyes. "I won't forget, I promise." Traoré looked at the girl, then back at Jasmine. Sometimes helping one mother is more powerful than passing 100 laws. The girl waved as the car drove off, and for the first time in a long time, Jasmine Crockett felt like politics had a soul again. On the plane back to the U.S., Jasmine reviewed the raw interview footage there. It was the moment she asked Trey one unexpected question off script. "Mr. President, what is something you wish the world knew about you?" He paused, then he said, "I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to be the kind of man my mother would have been proud of." Jasmine didn't speak. The camera stayed on his face, steady, calm, full of sorrow and strength. In post-production, she begged the network not to cut that part. They aired it live, unedited. 4 days later, the internet exploded. Millions watched millions. Cried news anchors called it the most human moment in modern politics. Young men posted videos saying, "This changed how I see leadership." Mothers shared it with sons, teachers showed it in classrooms, and Jasmine. She stood in the back of a studio, hands shaking as the clip played, because she knew this wasn't just television. This was truth. 3 days later, Jasmine called Trey. The video had crossed 50 million views. "I had no idea." She said, "You've become a symbol." His voice came through the phone soft. "I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to serve my people with love." There was silence. Then he added, "Make sure the world doesn't just talk about me. Let them remember the little girl, the soldier, the boy with no shoes, the